Hey everyone, just Ben today, and I am going to be talking about the trader's tale of the golden age of the solar clipper. If you have watched either of my 2020 reading challenge videos, you're already familiar that I read this series in January, and this one really stood out to me. The author, Nathan Lowell, actually I read another trilogy by him, and his writing style and the story he tells in general just really stood out to me. But this one really hit home. The golden age of the solar clipper. This series is something that for me was enlightening. I found myself getting home from work and trying to read for as long as possible, losing sleep for like a week straight. I would get home and all I would do is try to read until I fell asleep. Then I would go to work, and on my 15-minute break, I'd go out and I'd read. On my half-an-hour lunch break, I'd go out, I'd read some more. I just wanted to get through this series. And today, I want to do a review on it. I'm going to start with the beginning of this, going over the series as a whole, trying to be spoiler-free as best as possible, and letting people know why they should also read this, and who specifically should read this series. So, the reason why this series is wonderful is it starts out with our main character, who he has an unfortunate event where he lives on a planet where his mother is a university professor. Now, in this world, everything is on planets. It's in the future. It's a sci-fi where different planets have different situations. And on the planet he lives on, the big thing is the university. It's owned by a corporation. Well, his mother ends up getting in a car accident, but by car, it's more of some, like, on-planet spaceship type thing, and she passes away. Now, because this is a corporate-run planet, the housing he's in is for university employees and their dependents, so he cannot live in the apartment he lives in anymore. And because of the way his mother passed away, he doesn't get the kind of compensation he could have, and he loses his life, so to speak. Like, he has no home. Our main character is a bit of an outcast. He's different. He grew up in a university home, so he's been around old people his whole life in an intellectual environment, so he doesn't relate to other children as he's growing up as well. And because of his being an outcast, he hasn't made very many friends, and now he's lost his home and he has to leave. Typically, if he had gotten enough money, he could have bought a ticket to go anywhere, then start a new life. But because he doesn't have the money, he has to choose one of the free options. There's 3 different things for him. He could have taken the planet's option, where they would just take him to the closest non-corporate planet, and he would be pretty much homeless. He could join the military, but he's not a fighter. Or he could join the trading conglomerate as a whole. Now, in this world, the whole trading conglomerate focuses on the same rules and regulations for every trading group, company. Even if you're a private trader, you fall under the same rules and regulations, and that's the one he goes for. And by almost luck in certain circumstances, he ends up getting on a trading ship. And this is the start of a new life for him. Now, being part of a trading ship it's got almost a militaristic structure, where you sign a contract and you have certain ranks based on when you first start out, you're a quarter share. And if you complete certain classes, you're qualified to move up to a half share in whatever department you finish a class in. And then you have to find a ship with an availability for the class and rank that you are qualified for, but you still have that for if you find a job. And it's very much so militaristic in the fact that your superiors tell you what to do, and you have to listen. Along with why the militaristic thing really comes out to me is on these ships. You are on these ships. The only people you have access to are the people you work with, for several weeks to months at a time before you make port in another planet, solar system, or base where you're dropping off your set of goods. And for me, why this really stood out is I grew up, my dad was in the military. I moved every 3 or 4 years as a kid. So just like our main character, I didn't really have friends. I mean, I did, but when you grow up in that lifestyle, you make surprisingly good, strong friendships. But when you move, everything's done. I mean, I could have tried to keep in contact, but when I was a kid, the internet was around, but wasn't as big as it is today. And what 9 or 10-year-old thinks about writing letters back and forth with some kid he knew halfway across the world. So I started over several times, and so I can very much so relate to the whole concept of starting over. But beyond that, I can relate to our main character because I think very similar to him. I'm not exactly the same because based on how he grew up, he knows things I don't. But at the same time, I can relate to his loneliness. And that's the big key to this story is our main character is extremely lonely. He is alone. He grew up being alone. He had his mother, and that was it. He didn't have friends. He didn't have any other family he knew or was close to. And for the first time when he gets this job, he becomes part of a group, a very exclusive group, this trading company. And very similarly, like being part of the military, I understand that when you're in a company, group, military, sports team even, like this, your coworkers, your team members are very much part of your family. And he realizes how important this is, that they're who you have. You don't have anybody else who can relate to you. Because unless they're in the same situation as you, they're different. They're a whole different group of people. So the people he works with becomes his family, becomes his first real friends, the people who actually know him, who he actually knows. And it starts to change him. It starts to make him understand that relationship that he didn't have growing up. He didn't know what it was like to have friends. So the concept of loneliness doesn't go away because when you're part of the trading company, one scene that happens is when they finally get to a port and you're able to have some freedom to go out and drink and have fun, the kind of stuff you can't do when you're working kind of 24/7 on the ship, is the people port side is, from a militaristic point of view, is they'd be civvies. They're civilians. They're not like us. And it increases the concept of being alone because throughout the series, you have this 5-6 days maybe where you get to spend time with people like that, but they don't understand you. You can't hang out at a bar and meet some girl and be like, hey, look, you're really nice. I'm leaving in 2 days. I don't know if I'm going to see you again because my ship might not be coming back to this port for years based on their route of travel. So the only people you can interact with are other people who are where you can interact with truthfully are other people who are also working on a ship, whether it's yours or another one. And it just breeds the fact that the people who work on the ship, yes, they're a family, but they're all lonely, but they're lonely together, if that makes sense. And I think people who could really enjoy reading this series is anybody who has been an outcast throughout school or are currently an outcast in school right now, because it's going to really show you that if you can find the right group and really kind of jump into that group, don't be afraid that you're not going to be welcome. For me in high school, it was doing theater. Theater for me was a family. And although after graduating high school, I've moved on from that family and am currently trying to find a new family, so to speak, beyond, because military reserves, I do that once a month, not like I see them all the time. So I'm trying to create my own new family, my new friends. but for me in high school it was theater. And I think for everybody out there, they can find a group like that. And this series is for those kind of people who are trying to find where they fit in. If they're dealing with being alone, it'll teach them that they should just kind of put their mind towards something that they learn to enjoy and find a group to be with, find a family that they fit into. So with getting over the more general non-spoilery stuff, if you have not read this series, you should probably stop listening to or watching this now, because I want to get into more details with this series and I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. So going on, I'm going to try to go book by book and discuss my thoughts and feelings about it. So starting out with the first book in the series, we have Quarter Share. Now, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, I love the titling of these books. It's so simplistic. A quarter share is the lowest level on a ship. So if you've read these books before, you understand that our main character gets on a ship and he decides to dedicate himself to giving himself the best opportunity to always have a job. And I can respect that a lot because he's found a place that he belongs. And rather than bettering himself, because I can agree, you have a place to live, you have food, the money you make is only useful for small entertainment things or when you have shore leave buying alcohol and fancy dinners, it feels like. So that is a life I can get behind a little bit. I wish I could live in a world where I didn't have to pay rent, didn't have to pay for insurance, things like that. It was all covered. And all I had to worry about was extra stuff, the non-necessities. And he finds that he'd rather keep that going, so he tries to train in all the different classes of jobs. And I can appreciate that because I feel the main character has an intelligence that I can respect. I don't want to sound like I'm being prideful and saying I feel like I relate to him. I'm very similar to that, is that concept of learning whatever you can to be better. So by doing this, he kind of impresses some people, as well as the fact that he's willing to help people outside of his own job because he also understands that the ship running as a whole is important to him. So if he helps other people, it gets everything done better, it makes the ship run better, and in the end it benefits him. And it's the concept of almost like a self-sacrificing or a selflessness that I can kind of agree with, because selflessness isn't a real thing in my mind. It's, most people who say they're doing a selfless service, in the end, they're still getting a good feeling, so they're still doing it for themselves. And I feel like our main character is kind of like, yeah, I'm selfless, but in the back of his mind, he realizes he's doing it because anything that makes everything run better makes his life better. Throughout the first book, he really learns a lot about what the world he's stepped into is like. And I can get behind, somebody who jumps in with both feet. I kind of wish I could be more like this. Probably one of my biggest hopes or jealousies I've had of people are the kind of people who can kind of pick up, go somewhere, start fresh and new, and just do it. I know he was forced, and that might make it easier to kind of make that decision, but I kind of wish some days that I could find a random place, move there, and start over. So, getting into the second book, Half Share, he's gotten a new level of job, not in the same job he started in, but now he's in a new job specialty, but because he's helped out and he's learned all the jobs, he can do whatever he wants. And I can't remember if it was in the first book or the second book. Another scene that really stood out to me was the scene when he was in the bar and his best friends, which are female, are trying to get him to hook up with somebody. And this whole concept of, having friends that are female and being in a world where, you're not allowed to fraternize, I can kind of relate to, because personally, I've found female friends much more enjoyable than having male friends. Now, that's based on your stereotypical male friends are all about male things. I don't have to get into details there. And female friends, you can connect. And when he goes out to try on the new clothes, like, I could picture myself being in that situation and loving it just like he does, because having that platonic, there's nothing gonna happen, whether it's because they just don't see you that way or because of the circumstances they're in, that there's no sexuality here. It's for fun. Yes, we understand in our heads what's going on, but we're not going to act on it. That is beautiful. Like I said, for me doing theater, there are times where it's like, you know what? You're like family. And I use that word loosely because, there's the whole connotations that why would you think that way of family? But it's a unique experience where with a female, it's like I knew people that doing theater, I've kissed people that I had no feelings for because that's what you do. I've also had, you have your inside jokes, your sexual jokes that you can joke with females, males, it doesn't matter. And nobody cares. It's like you're just friends. They're one of the guys. You're one of the girls, however you want to look at it. And I can really get behind that relationship he starts to build. And then when he goes out to the bar, this is the one thing where I can't relate because I wish I had the kind of confidence he does. And I can understand because I understand the concept that you're not afraid of rejection, because I was an awkward kid. Trying to get a girlfriend was difficult, and I knew rejection growing up. And when I was younger, I had that kind of confidence that I was like, what's the worst they can do is say no. And it's something I wish I could get back. And that's another thing about this book that just stood out is I wish I had his level of like understanding and confidence that it was like the worst that they can do is say no. And my mind worries too much nowadays that I could get slapped or they could scream for thinking I'm a creeper or something weird like that. But anyways, I thought it was done really well. And the concept of, this is the world they live in, is you make, especially when you're on a ship where you're not allowed to fraternize with the people you see every day, which I think is a good thing to have. So the only time you have to fraternize to enjoy life, so to speak, in a adult way is the 4 or 5 days you're on shore leave. And the best people to do that with are other people who are on ships, because the civilians who live on the planet or the port or the space station don't quite understand that you're going to be gone forever. And he gets to enjoy that small time with somebody important. And it's, some people would say it's love, some people would say it's lust, but he truly cares about the person, because in those situations, when you see somebody for a short amount of time, you can surprisingly form strong connections with people in such a small amount of time. And I can kind of relate to that. And it really hits me right in my chest, like understanding that kind of, hey, I saw you across the bar and it all clicked, or we had a conversation and I'm never going to see you again. And part of it's false because, when you know you're not going to see somebody again, you start to, did I love them? Or if I had stayed around, would I have realized it wasn't real? But that's the whole beauty of those quick encounters, is who knows? So moving on, he gets up to full share, and a lot of the reactions he has between these first 3 books, I think the first 3 books can be taken together as almost a trilogy, because the whole story takes place on the first ship he's on. And it shows a lot of his progression. It shows these building of these close familial relationships, friendships, and his outside of the ship he works on, some of the relationships he builds. And by the end of the full share book, he decides he's going to go to the academy. And I will say I kind of love the end of that, where it's like, oh, hey, we're going to the academy too. As well as I find it, again, this is, male fantasy. I wish I could be living his life, is when it's you got fired or you quit because you're going to the academy, you're no longer a shipmate. The fraternization rules don't apply anymore between both him and his best friend. And all the girls being like, oh, I want to kiss you, or all these other things. And of course, the one girl that he had created, one of the few girls he had created this weird, stronger than friendship bond with, that because of the no fraternization, it puts you in a weird, very close place, but without it going any farther because it can't. He kind of creates a relationship with the one girl. I can really get behind that, and I don't know how truthful it would be to real life, because I can't think of any situations like it. But I thought it was kind of cute. It was interesting to see this whole concept, and I kind of like the fact that they didn't tell him that they were going to the academy too, and surprised him with that. So the first 3 books for me were definitely like 5 out of 5. But when we got into the 4th book, Double Share, I kind of had a little bit of a disconnect. I get why he didn't go through the whole academy experience, but at the same time, like, I kind of wish I could have seen it, because there were some important things. Starting with this book, like, each book is like a starting over point almost, because with Double Share, he's an officer on a ship, and he has to start from zero almost. Like, he's on a new ship. He has to try to earn the respect of the people around him and make changes. I like this one a lot because he was put on a ship that was horrible, and especially coming from a ship with no fraternization at all, to seeing the complete opposite of that, like the extreme opposite of that, the negativity that can come from a ship that allows relationships, whether they're consensual or not, between crew. And I like the fact, this is again when I can relate to this character. It's like, I'm super, like, women should be respected. Everybody should be respected, of course, but there's no reason that this should be allowed. And I was so behind everything he did in that to try to make the ship better. And I also kind of enjoy the concept of, oh, hey, we're part of your harem. The whole, yes, we know we're not sleeping with you, but the rest of the crew doesn't need to know that. And it's an enjoyable kind of, like, I'll laugh at that a little bit. And it was a really good book, and I was worried with the time jump and the whole starting over with new characters that we wouldn't have time to really, like, care or learn about the other characters to really have that much of an emotional connection. But because we stick with the same main character and we know him so well and we've got a connection to him, we vicariously, through him, have an emotional connection to the other characters. And this continues through the next couple of books, that even though we're only with some of these characters for that one book, like, their lives have an emotional reaction with us. By the end of Double Share, he has the whole interaction of, he was able to make it so the owner could get rid of this captain, and it gets moved so that there's a new captain, and it's done really well, and we move on to Captain's Share. Now, again, this character just finally gets his captain, and again, he starts over from zero. And this is an example of, this is when I really got nervous about, well, how are we going to know these characters? And the author, Nathan Lowell, does a good job of just, within a short amount of time, really getting you to relate and understand these characters. And it's something about his writing that I have to read more of his stuff, because not just this series, him as an author probably is like a 5 out of 5 author for me now. And I'm just looking forward to reading more of his stuff, but I gotta get through the suggestions people gave me first. So in Captain's Share, again, it's a whole situation where he takes a ship, turns it around, but instead of turning the crew around, he turns about the same. He turns the crew around, but also makes the ship better in general. Where in Double Share, it was, most of the crew was, half the crew was okay, it was just kind of fixing them. And even though it's kind of a repetitive concept a little bit, it works. I love the quirkiness that you get between the different people, and I love also that you start to realize that his whole no fraternization kind of holds him back at this point. And it's interesting to see his trying to overcome between captain's share and owner's share, him overcoming the fact that it's like, hey, stuff that you learned on your first ship was good for you, but you don't need to use that to like assume what everybody else is going to do. And he's constantly learning. And in owner shares, he finally understands. He finally, I feel he, in his evolution as a person, his feelings, his character, he finally kind of gets to a point where he can accept that, well, working on these ships, yeah, you shouldn't be sleeping with everybody. That causes problems. But if you can create these connections with a one person, that's the person you should try to connect with. Because again, in captain's share, if I could remember correctly, he had gotten married to some woman who lives on the one space station, and that was a bad idea. And I saw it coming, like I knew it was going to happen, that she wasn't right for him. And that was one thing in the series I was not that happy about, because I was like, I would prefer if he had not gotten married, because it was a ruin waiting to happen, because she wouldn't understand him. And I think his own fears in owner's share and captain's share is what holds him back from understanding the potential for other people. And he puts his own labels on everything and doesn't accept other people's feelings at first. When he finally starts to realize that other people feel differently and have different ideals, he evolves and finally realizes his own mistakes in how he's been acting over the last dozen or so years, and he just grows as a person even more. And that's probably what this series really showed me a lot about, is that every stage in life, you are constantly growing, you're constantly meeting new people, and you're learning new things. And like I said at the beginning, it's a story of loneliness. And I understand that is nobody likes being alone. And one of the scariest things in the world is being lonely in a crowd. And I feel like he understood that. I mean, it's not like he didn't have people around him at the beginning of the series. And at later points, he still has that loneliness when he's put on a new ship and the only person who's supposed to be close to him is his wife. But he sees his wife only for a few days and then he's gone. And it's true that, overcoming loneliness is difficult. And the best way to do that is by making a friend. It sounds so simple, but it's so complicated at the same time. And this series really showed that if you can find the right group, if you have the motivation to try to be the one that starts a new group, and finds people to join your group, it's a very difficult thing to do, but if you can do it, there's something rewarding in finding that family that you make yourself. I mean, everybody has a father, everybody has a mother. It's biological. You might have siblings, you might have uncles, aunts, grandmothers, grandparents, and being close to your own family has some merit, but at the end of the day, the family you choose for yourself, whether it be from high school graduation, the people you keep in contact with, a club at college, join the military, the work you're at, if you find a core group of people at work, those people that you choose to be your family are probably going to be one of the strongest things in your life and very important to you and your development, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So that was the Trader's Tale of the Golden Age of the Solar Clipper. I am new at this whole booktube review concept, and I just really wanted to kind of get a little bit off my chest about this series that just really kind of sank into my soul a little bit. And I hope if you've read the series, you can relate, or let me know in the comments if you had different opinions. If you have not read the series, I know I said there are specific people that it would be good for, but I think it's worth at least a read for anybody because it's a unique story that I have not seen anywhere else. And let me know if you do read it what you think. And as always, I will see you the next time that the wheel turns.